Ali, atrévete a lo imposible, Season 1, Episode 3. Today I have my beloved cousin, Anna Perez. I love her and I appreciate her, and I will start crying 1 minute into the podcast, but you mean a lot to me, and I really appreciate you making the drive. Just a fun fact for everyone, Anna and I, when Anna was in college, I lived in Columbia, South Carolina for some time. And me and Anna, I somehow convinced Anna to like start this page called the A and G Show. And it was like Anna and Gabriella show. And it was just like us, I think it's answering questions on Facebook Live.
And it was an epic fail. Must I remind you?
Yeah, so this is actually our rekindling video. We're going to talk about the ups and downs of 3 episodes of the A&G show. But here we are again. How many years later?
Ooh.
7, 8 years later?
Well, I've been actually teaching this is going to be my 8th year.
8th year.
This is going to be my 8th year. So, and that was before I even like graduated. So I want to say 2 years before. So I want to say about 9-10 years ago.
Shout out to the A&G show.
I think we deleted that page. So
yeah.
Anybody who goes to look for it might not find
Won't
it.
be there. Don't look for it. But I am really grateful. Thank you so much for coming out here. I really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get started. Who is Anna Perez?
So I am a teacher, but before a teacher, I am a mother. I am a mother of 2. I have a 4-year-old girl and I have a now 1-year-old boy. And I am also a wife. You know, I am married. I've been married for 3 years now, and been with him for about 8 years though. So
y'all dated for 5 years?
Before getting married, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we dated 5 years before getting married. Made sure I was in my 5th year before I got pregnant too. Of teaching. I didn't want to, Yeah, like I said, I am a teacher. I am actually a special ed teacher. I teach kindergarten through 5th grade at a elementary school, of course. It's resource petition, which I don't think many people know what resource really is. Me coming to learn about special ed just as a teacher, but also, knowing that a lot of people don't know what special ed is. And, even like when we get parents and they're always like, no, special ed, definitely not. Like it's automatically shut down because we begin to think about special ed as we have envisioned it from the past. And now it's like an umbrella of different things. And when I say I'm a resource teacher, it's more so of a pull-out version. I'm pulling students out of their classrooms, their gen ed classrooms, which is, the generalized population, to help them get as close to, the rest of their peers. So these are students who might be a few grades behind. We're looking at reading disabilities, comprehension, writing disabilities, math, specific learning disabilities is what we call that. We look at autism as a disability, ADHD, speech. Speech falls under that umbrella. If you get speech, it's still a special ed. It's still under special ed. Now, I don't work with speech, but I do work with those teachers one-on-one. But like I said, where I work right now is resource, and that's what I've been doing since I started my career.
What do you think is the most common, other than that structure, what do you think is the most common misconception of like special ed programs within schools?
Like I said, I think the most common misconception of it is that those kids really don't have the possibility of doing things or can't learn how to do things. And I think that misconception doesn't just come from adults. I do think it comes from other kids. And I feel like sometimes even other teachers, especially when they're new to the career, like they don't really understand what special ed is. And even our parents, they don't understand what it is. It doesn't mean something is wrong or, it's just, a different way of learning. And we all learn at different speeds. We all grow at different speeds. and we don't all learn the same way.
Yep.
And, and that's what I try to teach that to not just my students, but my kids as well, my personal kids. What so-and-so knows and is good at, you might not be good at. But what you're good at, so-and-so might not be good at. And they know, you ask my students, they know, I'll be like, I'm sorry, that was my mistake. I accept that I made a mistake because I know it's important for them to understand that they're going to make mistakes as well. And that they're not perfect and that I'm not perfect. And so when I'm talking to them, I have to explain to them too. I'm like, when they get into this perspective of I'm not good enough, that's where I have to go down and be like, well, for me, math has not always been my strength. So that's one of my biggest examples. The teacher across the hallway is a lot better at math than I am. And if I need help on something, if I don't understand something myself, I'm going to go across the hall and I'm going to ask her for help, to help me. Just like I might be good at something else that she's not good at.
What made you choose this career? And I know this is going to go into a bit of your past and who was Anna Perez, what's the journey like, and if you want to start by answering why you chose this career, if you want to start by explaining your upbringing, it's completely up to you.
Yeah, I mean I am one of 6 kids. I've always loved having a big family. I've never been like, oh, I wish I was an only child. No, I loved having the siblings I had. And and I know me and my siblings get along very well. We're very well together. We constantly in contact. I think we're really close with each other. But I think for me, it's funny every time someone says, how did you know, or what was it? I walked through that pre-K classroom right after having a meltdown, crying because my mom left me, trying to understand why my mom would leave her daughter there alone in that pre-K classroom with people she didn't know. I walk in there and I began to see the teachers and things, and something in me was like, oh, this is nice. For me, it was like a pre-K, kindergarten. I was like, oh, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. And I know. Most of the kids will say that. Most kids are like, yeah, I want to be a teacher when I get older. And even if I ask my students, they're like, yeah, I want to be a teacher. But I really did feel it then that I wanted to be a teacher. Did I know where, when, what type of teacher I wanted to be? No, not at that moment I didn't. I will say I can remember most of my teachers' names. So I think that had a lot of impact on me continuing that. But, and like I said, I really did have great teachers and really nice teachers and teachers who looked out for us. So, and I knew that they were there to help me. And I think that's one of the reasons why I knew I wanted to be a teacher. So then, one of the 6 of us has a disability. The youngest of us was born, Francisco was born with a disability. Did my mom know what it was? No, when he first started, it was, late to walk. He wasn't able to walk as soon as everybody else. It took him a couple of years before he could walk. Speaking was another thing. It took him some time to learn. A lot of things were a little bit, took him longer to learn than others. And so my mom began to wonder, what's going on. So, eventually came to diagnosis of he has a developmental delay, which is what most students at that age, when they're, delayed in certain things, not meeting certain milestones, yes, they'll be, typically developmentally delayed. And so, he began to receive all those services. But it just seemed like every time my mom would go to meetings, because we have meetings every year as special ed teachers for those students to develop a new IEP, which is an individualized education plan for students with disabilities. And, it just talks about goals and what you're working on and how the student is doing and, their scores on certain assessments, just to let the parent know where they're at and what their needs are. And what will be provided to them. So when my mom would go to these and she didn't know what was going on and things like that, and I wouldn't know what was going on and none of us knew, I began to say, okay, this is, hard for my mom to understand. And if I don't understand it and I speak English, it's another thing, And then I got into high school. I'm telling you, my whole path was, I'm going to be a teacher. I just knew it. I knew that was in my head. It was, I'm going to be a teacher. I got to high school. We were able to do what was called teacher cadet. And I was like, definitely sign me up. I'm doing it. I did it. I loved it. I did it in a regular classroom. In the third grade classroom, we would go out during high school. They'd take us to the elementary school. We'd be there for a few days. And it's almost like student teaching, just for high schoolers. And it's not really as, intense as student teaching in the college. But then I also did it in the special ed classroom at the high school level. And it was amazing. It was different. And I loved it. The kids in the special ed classroom had such a big heart. They were so loving. It was different. Like, I don't know. You've met my brother, but kids with disabilities, I don't know what it is. They just have such a loving heart. And I knew then, and knowing that my mom didn't understand certain things, knowing how hard it was for her to understand the concept and what was going on and what these teachers were presenting to her, was like, I need to be a special ed teacher. I want to be a special ed teacher. So that right there was, I decided that when I got to high school. Not right away, but like 2 years, 3 years in, I knew I wanted to be a special ed teacher. And that's really what pushed me. Did my parents agree with that decision I had made? No.
Really?
Yeah, believe it or not. So, my dad's always been, my dad was a drunk. So that was something to grow up with. It wasn't easy, but I'm not saying that, he was the worst father in the world, because no, definitely wasn't. He gave us what we needed, Same with my mom. We weren't well off either. I'm not going to say, we were, we had the money to do everything. We were able to do all of these things in terms of career, and getting what we needed to be able to be successful in school. It was harder for us. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So because of my brother, she was not able to work. She had, he has all these medical things as well going on. So she wasn't able to work. My dad would work. There's 6 kids in the house. So we didn't have internet to begin with. And, once you reach high school, everything is, by the time I reached, everything was computerized. Everything was technology based. Everything was alternative and via internet. So I do remember, and best days of my life, of course, I don't mind. I didn't mind. I loved it. We used to walk to the library from where we would live, which I don't know if you recall where we used to live.
Yeah.
And how far away that is from the library.
Yep.
But we would walk to the library. Some days, my parents would drop us off when my dad was home, and they would go do laundry at the laundromat, and they'd leave us at the library while they did the laundry so we could do things. But I do recall walking to the library multiple times as well, to get things done. With that being said, getting scholarships weren't easy either, because, the internet, There was a point when I told my mom what I wanted to do was be a teacher, right? And I recall, and I know she'll remember because we talk about it all the time. Now it's, we laugh about it because, I remember we got in a little bit of an argument over it. And I remember her saying, why would you do that? Like, why not be a lawyer? I will say I have my way with words. I will say that. I do have my way with words. I can convince many people about things too. You're not the only one. But I do remember we got into a little argument about it, and she was like, be a lawyer, be a doctor, that they make more, as a teacher. They're not gonna, you're gonna be dealing with kids all the time. You're gonna be dealing with parents. You're gonna be, they're not gonna pay you. Like, do you think teachers get paid? I mean, back then, I hadn't researched what a teacher made. I didn't know what a teacher made. In my head, I wanted to be a teacher. I was stuck on being a teacher. So I do remember having that little bit of an argument with her about that. And I was like, no, I want to be a teacher. And I remember telling her, I'm like, at this point, and I told her, I'm like, I think I get to choose what I want to do with my life as my career. If I'm going to be the one going to college and I'm going to be the one putting in the work, I think I should be able to choose. And so we left it at that day. And I will say the next day when I came home, I had a nice little note from my mom. And I think she had probably been crying too. And I think she felt bad because she left me a note. And in that note, just, overall, she was like, I'm very sorry. You're right. You should do what you want to do. It's your dream. That right there was like, for me, it was important. Because I really did want her to understand that. I understand she has, she wanted me to do something else, but I have my dream and what I wanted to do, So I think that was a very important part. And I think it's very important because if I can still remember it, in my head, I do think it's really important. And I remember bringing it up recently. We were recently talking about that as well. But like I said, yeah, it wasn't, my parents agreed with me. No, that was definitely not the case at the beginning. We had a little bit of an argument over whether I should or shouldn't. But like I said, I came home to that beautiful note. She apologized. She was like, I know you can do it. She's like, I just see you and I know you can do so many things. But if that's what you want, then I'm going to support you.
You, growing up, I remember you were always and have always been very headstrong, like very like driven, very like firm in what you believe. You've always been an individual that's like, I'm gonna do this because I'm gonna do this. And I've always, as a younger cousin, have always really, really admired that about you. You're the first out of my extended family to get a degree. What did that process look like for you? Like, how did you figure out, one, that was an opportunity for you, but two, how did you like find the proper resources to go out? Because you were going to the library, and that's right, mind you, that's like a mile walk, a mile and a half. I would say a mile is not. I think it's a mile and a half. How did you remain like headstrong too, considering the conditions at home as well? Like, how did you know, like, this is my path because this is my path?
I just, like I told you, like, it's just like you said, I've always been so headstrong about things, and I think my mom says it all the time too. I'm necia. Soy muy necia. I just, when I want to do something, I'll do it. And I've learned to not care about what others think. Because the way I see it is, and I'll say it again, this is what I tell, I've told my husband's niece this too. I'm like, I really have learned to not care about what other people think about me, because people are always going to have something to say, whether it's good or whether it's bad.
Yep.
They always have an opinion. And I've learned to just let them have their opinions.
Yeah.
Because I know if it's true, I know it's not. And honestly, I really don't care much for other people's opinions, because if it's not helping me, you can say and do what you want.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the things, like, I learned to not care about what other people thought about me, for one, and do. My goal was set forth into, I'm getting into college and I'm going to be a teacher. And that's all I saw in front of me, if that makes sense. What everybody else was doing or what everybody thought, I did not.
It was not of your concern.
It was not of my concern. With that being said, I had to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And, if that meant picking up the phone, I've never been one to pick up a phone and talk to people. But if that's what it meant, I was going to pick up the phone, call, send an email, ask the guidance counselor, ask my teachers, even call the FAFSA, place. I do remember, the first thing when they said, you got to fill out the FAFSA. I'm like, what? The what?
Yeah, yeah.
What's the FAFSA? I'm like, what is that? Like, how do I get to it? Getting emails and So I remember going to the library to fill out the FAFSA.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being like, what am I doing here?
Yes. Yeah.
The FAFSA is, anybody who's filled out the FAFSA knows, one, how extensive it is, and two, how wordy it is.
Yeah.
It's not friendly. It's not teenage friendly. It's not recently graduating from high school friendly language. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to look up certain words in Google to figure out what this means type of situation.
I would just hope that when I press submit, there was no error message.
Like, what is this little button, But I do remember, even going up to one of the librarians and being like, hey, I need help with this. I don't know if you know anything about it. I remember that. And I remember her coming up to me trying to help me. And I think she was able to help me at one point. But then with some other things, I had to call the FAFSA, or like even the college I was going to. I think that, and I don't want to say only the first year was hard for me. Filling out the second year was still hard for me. I don't think I got into the habit of it until the third year, which by then, I was also helping my brother fill his out, which it was his first time around too. And I knew how hard it was, but at least then he had someone to ask questions. And I also remember my cousin who's in Florida calling me up and asking me, hey, I need help with this. I'm trying to fill out the FAFSA. Do you remember how And I personally remember being in his spot, trying to remember how to fill it out. And I know how hard it was. And I was happy I could help. I was happy to know that I was able to help and tell him what he needed to do. Or even like, I remember how'd you do this? How'd you go about doing this to get into this? Or like, they're telling me I need this. What is that? And I was able to, tell him what to do. Or like, I can't get this. I need this much more money. What can I do? Type of thing. And yeah, there was a point where I almost thought, Gabby, there was a point where I really almost thought I wasn't going to go because I didn't get enough money. I remember my mom getting her jewelry. My first year before I went in. And I'll never forget that. Because I do remember her going into her jewelry that she had been taking care of for so many years. My mom collects things. My mom's a collector, but I know so many of those things she held dear to her. But I do remember her going in there and telling me, you're going. And she went and she pulled out that jewelry. And she sold it. It might have not, they didn't even give her what it was worth. But she sold it so that I could go to college. Was that enough? No. I had to get on the phone and call the college I got accepted into and tell them, hey, I'm having this situation. I don't have enough money. Is there anything else that I can do? I had been going back and forth. And honestly, Gabby, I had already gone through to orientation by then. I had gone through that summer orientation they do before you go into college. I had already done all that. I had done the pick your room, pick your, roommate type of situation. You already got everything handled. Yep. That's where I was at. It was like a week or two before having to go. And I was at this point where I was like at a standstill. I was at what's going to happen? And I remember calling them and I remember praying. And I'll always tell my mom, like, the faith in that was big for me. And the outcome of that just made it grow more. My sister asked me, she's like, why do you have so much faith in God and things like that? I'm like, and honestly, that was the moment that it hit me. Because lo and behold, 2 weeks later, guess where I was at? I was sitting in that dorm room crying because my parents were leaving me. That's where I was at because the college, texted me back, said, hey, we were able to find, another 2 grants that we can give you. Just do this, just go and apply for them. And we were able to do it that way.
Quite a journey, and some things that I'm learning now, and I've known you for 23 years of my life, which is my age, right? My whole life. And there's some things that I'm learning now, and it's I've always admired you and I've had so much respect for you, but it is definitely multiplied. You get to college And that's just the start of it, right? Because like the whole application process, like you're not even in a classroom.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like it's the beginning of it all. So what was your experience there? I mean, you get there, and I'm assuming this because this is the experience that I had, was I'm here and I feel so blessed to be here and to be in this position. What is that like? But it's the reason I say it as well is because while you feel so blessed, you feel so lost at
And
times. Overwhelmed because it's, I mean, growing up close to family,
Very
being in a
family-oriented,
new
like you said.
environment, very family oriented, new environment, classes, you know, your peers are at times in advanced positions or like have had internships before in high school, like
all these experiences.
yeah, all these experiences were like a month ago, you know, a similar situation. Like I'm applying to FAFSA, like I'm applying to scholarships, like I'm just trying to get there. So a month ago, you were just trying to be here, and now you're there, right? What's that like?
To begin with, like I said, 2 weeks later, I was sitting there crying my eyes out because they left me. And, you know, I remember my mom crying, and I remember my dad crying and dropping me off, and my siblings were there, and they were all like, you know, okay, you know. And I was like, okay, yeah, you know, it's okay, you know. They left, and it was like, whew. And then I remember later that night, 2 nights later, I was texting my sister, and I was like crying. I have never been away from my parents. Nonetheless, my siblings. And like you said, new environment. I'm sharing a room with a stranger. I don't know this person. I don't know who this is.
Yeah.
And I'm also around people who I don't know. I don't know any of them. And I'm sitting here, and I remember I texted her. I know she remembers because she's always messing with me about it. And I texted my older sister, and I'm like, please come get me now. It was like the middle of the night. I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to go home with y'all. I was homesick. And she said, you got this. It's okay. And so I remember the next morning I woke up, and I'm like, she's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm fine. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, but yes, sitting in those classrooms, like you said, it's very overwhelming when you first get there. And like you said, there's other students there who've already had all of the exposure. They've had all the experiences that you have not had. Like you said, growing up in a Hispanic household, you know, what I grew up in, definitely there was the resources. Like I said, I didn't have any of that, much less the exposure to certain things. So I was lost. Going into the classroom, I considered myself a pretty smart person. I mean, you know, decently smart. I
made it this far, guys.
I took honors classes, AP, you know, but getting into college, like you said, the exposure was different. The vocabulary that, you know, the professors were using sometimes, or like the students were using sometimes, and I was like, what is that? And honestly, till today, there's sometimes I'm like, wait, I hear a coworker talk, and I'm like, whoa, wait. What does that mean? And I'm just sitting here like smiling, like, yeah. And then later on, I'm like, get my big phone out, and I'm like Googling, like, what does this mean? I'm like, oh, that makes more sense now, you know. But that's exactly what it feels like when you're talking to someone you've never. So say you're talking about a topic. Earlier today, I showed you the axolotl.
Yeah,
one of my students showed me, and if I start talking about that to you, you would be like, what is she talking about? You'd feel lost, you know? And that's exactly what it feels like, sitting there listening to people talk about things and using vocabulary that you've never heard or that you've never been exposed to.
Yeah.
As, you know, especially, like I said, as a Hispanic, as a Latino, it's a lot of that is not there, the exposure to certain things. I'm here, but it's hard. It's not easy. There's always gonna be that language barrier. There's always gonna be that what's it called? The cultural, you know, differences. So yeah, it was hard. It was different. It was a struggle. And I'm not saying it was extremely hard either, but I'm just saying, like, there were little pieces where you're like, what? Like, can you please explain that a different way?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that was the hard part. Adapting to the new environment and then adapting to all the other things that other people had already been exposed to that you had not had the chance to be exposed to. And I'm honestly beginning to learn that a lot more as a teacher as well. Like, you have students who are in kindergarten and have already been exposed to everything. So many things, books, the vocabulary, because they've been read to at home. They know their ABCs, they know their numbers, they know all these things. And then you have those kids who haven't had that exposure. And you see it and you're like, gosh, there's such a big gap and a difference between them because they haven't been exposed to it. There are kids who know what the beach is, and there are kids who've never been to the beach. So here I am in my classroom as well, pulling up pictures of certain things that some of my students don't know what it is. And they're like, wait. And other kids are like, wait, you don't know what that is? You know? But it's that. They haven't been exposed to it. And I feel like that's a lot of what it is with us as Hispanics. Like, there's a lot of things that we're not exposed to. We don't have the resources as Hispanics sometimes, or we don't look for the resources sometimes as Hispanics, you know? And, you know, and sometimes that's all it requires is for us to look it up or ask, you know? But yeah, I think, honestly, if you ask me what my experience in college was, I liked it. You know, I did go to an all-girl college. It was different. I've never been the party type. You know that. I've always been I'm staying. So I used to, you know, just stay, you know, and I would, you know, watch shows, you know, it was you know, I'm going to, you know, study, do my work, go for walks around the college campus. But my experience in college, I guess, would be a lot different from a lot of other people. You know, I really took my college experience serious. Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes back to another thing that motivated me that I didn't tell you before was my parents crossed the border for me to get a better education. And that's another thing that drove me. And I've always told my parents that. I'm like, for me, it's y'all did so much for me. I feel the need to show y'all that it was worth it, you know? So not just because I wanted it, but because I just felt like, you know, they did it already. They did so much. You know, they came to a whole new country, risked their lives in the process of it so that their kids could have a better future. You know, and I think that's another thing that really did drive me, and I've always said it, you know. Now, and, you know, and I'll stick by it when I tell my kids, you know, my daughter and, you know, my son, and even I've had to say it to some of my siblings, you know, it's okay to not go to college. I'm not, you know, whatever path you choose, it's okay. You don't have to go to college to be successful. You don't have to go to college to make me proud as your mother. You know, you don't have to go to college, you know, just because you feel like you need to show someone that you are being successful. And I think that's another misconception that a lot of kids and teenagers have is, I have to go to college to be successful or to make someone proud. In my mind and in my head, it's not everybody was made for college. Not everybody is going to go to college. Absolutely. And that's okay. And like I said, that's really one of the big things I want my kids to understand, my personal kids to understand is, whatever your dream is, whether it be, if you want to go to college, you want to be a teacher, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, do it. Go for it. If you don't want to go to college, that's okay too. What's your dream? What do you want to do? What is it then? What drives you? What is it going to be? You know, I'm here. Do it. You know, whether you want to be a singer, you want to sing, go ahead. You want to be an actor, go act. Fashion designer, okay. You want to own a store, own it. You know, do what makes you happy. And do what motivates you. You know, because at the end of the day, that's what you're going to have. And I feel like, and that's what I told my mom when I remember telling her that when we had that argument is, I want to do something that I can look at and say, I am happy doing what I am doing, what I have chosen to do.
Yep.
I don't want to live my whole life saying, I don't want to do this. You know, I had a choice. I had the option. My dad didn't. He came here. He had to work in the sun to feed us. You know? So I'm like, I have a choice. I have an option. My kids, I want them to understand they have options. They have a choice. They can dream big, dream as big as you want to dream. You know? And I think I tell my students that as well. I'm like, you can do it. Like, you got this. Like, whatever you set your mind to, go for it. I mean, you know, will it happen easily? No. Will it, you know, take time? Maybe. Will you be successful in it? I don't know. But neither will you. Unless
if you don't
go.
try.
Unless you go for it. You know, I think there are a lot of barriers. There are a lot of things that you have to get through. A lot of, you know, things that you got to push through to get what you want. You know, but that's you. You fight for it. You go for it. You know,
as you did throughout your life, right? And I think it even means, obviously, like, for someone to say, like, go chase your dream, or like go do what you love, it means a lot from someone, right? But I think right here in this conversation and right now at this very moment, like, when you're saying it, it's like, you know, Anna hustled, you know, like, Anna didn't take no for an answer. Anna called the FAFSA office. Anna spoke to the financial aid person. Anna wanted to do something. It wasn't easy, but she went and she did it. What did it feel like walking across that platform? Graduation day.
It was a lot of emotions. I cried. I'll say that, because it was proud. An emotion of being proud, feeling proud. I remember my brother hugging me and saying, "I'm proud of you," and he's younger than me, you know.
Yeah.
I do remember. He's like, "You did it." He's like, "Wow," you know. That was something else. I was like, he made me cry. I told him, "You're making me cry. Stop." You know, I always say that. But I do remember that. You know, there are things in our lives that we're gonna remember.
Core memories.
Yeah, and I think that was one. You know, like, it hit. It settled in at that moment. I'm like, I'm doing it. I did it. I'm here. You know, it's real. It's a reality. Proud.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine. I mean, 4 years, you know, you're there because you want to be there. You graduate. You did it. Right. What about that early career, starting that career, right? Because that's the start. You know, sometimes going to college, you're like, oh, I'm starting. But really, it's when you graduate, it's like, okay, here we go. Take everything you've learned and apply it to your job. So what was the, like, first year of being a teacher like?
I think it was overwhelming still. I felt prepared. I do think the college that I went to prepared me to be a teacher. I think it did a really good job preparing me. But it didn't take away the overwhelming feeling of, I'm still new to this. This is a new thing for me. I did student teaching. You know, I did my solo directed teaching as well. But wow, this is my classroom. These are actually my students. I'm not borrowing them from anyone. These are mine. Yeah. You learn a lot that first year. I learned how patient I can be, for sure. And I learned, you know, I tell everybody, I'm like, I think I learn every day from my students something new. And that's something, like I said, my first year was overwhelming, but it was also like, I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted to do. You know, learning a lot about, you know, social, emotional, because as a special ed teacher, like I said, I teach kids who have all sorts of needs, and some of those are the emotional and social needs, the anger, you know, how do I regulate my emotions? How do I control those emotions type of thing? Learning how to teach them these things. So later on, I learned that I can do pretty well, believe it or not. But I like I said, like learning all the aspects of the paperwork that you have to do that goes into special ed. Like I said, we have to meet with parents every year. We have to write these IEPs. We have to collect all of the data throughout the year. But also, like I said, I asked. I continued to ask. If I needed help or didn't understand something, I asked. I asked someone who was there longer than me, who had already had the experience, especially, someone who knew. Until this day, I still ask. I still question things. There's still things I have questions about that I'm not sure about. And, like I told you, I tell my students all the time, like, it's okay to not know.
I think that's the, like, perfect definition of humility, too, within a professional career of, like, yeah, you have years of experience, but every day you're learning, and every day, someone that's probably fresh out of university can teach you something new. But, like, having that understanding and knowing that you don't know everything, which I think is something that some people struggle with. But for you to say, like, I still ask now.
Yeah, definitely. I still ask when I have questions. I still ask when I have doubts. And I question things. It's okay to question in your own career, whether things are, whether you agree or whether you don't agree with certain things. I think it's really important for you to stand up for what you believe and what you agree with at times. And if you don't agree with a certain thing, say it. Don't be scared, And I mean, for me, I think it's like if you feel like you're too scared to question things and where you're at, then maybe that's not where you're comfortable, and that's not the place to be. I can honestly say that where I work at, I told you I've been working there for 7 years. It's gonna be my 8th year, and I love it. And my husband asked me, why don't you move to a closer school? I'm like, no, definitely not. I'm staying where I'm at. I love it there. I like it there. The environment is great. The teachers I work with, my coworkers are great. I don't, have any issues. The administration is great. Like I've always felt, it's always been a welcoming environment. We've always felt, I have a question, I have something, I can go to them. There's no doubt in that,
Coming up on 8 years of career experience, professional experience, what would you tell Anna that's watching her mom, I'm not trying to cry, watching her mom, like, collect, like, look through her jewelry to see, how much money she can get. What would you tell that Anna?
I mean, for me, I think I'd tell her you did it. Was it easy watching her do that? My mom do that? No. Is it easy remembering? Definitely not. But, you did it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's really, like, yeah, that's what I would tell myself. You're going to do it. You got it.
You're young. You have 2 beautiful kids. You have such an amazing story. I mean, especially for people listening out there that, like, may feel like they don't have, like, the best cards handed to them, and maybe they feel alone, or they feel like, oh, no one really understands this, or, like, no one really gets the struggle. But there are other people out there that are, that hustled and that made it. Right? Just,
yeah, definitely.
Like you're saying, to that version of you, I made it, I did it. This is exactly where I want to be in life. So, I mean, congratulations, right? I just, that's really the only word that comes to mind. So what's in store for you in the future?
Well, for me, it's, like I said, I like what I do. I love working with the kids directly. And I love the position I'm in right now, where I get to see different groups at different times. And I get to see these kids growing up. Like I said, I get to see sometimes from kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade, if I'm lucky. Sometimes, they might move away. Hard, very hard when they get to 5th grade and you have to say bye to them. Because then you feel it like they're already yours. Honestly, within the first year, I already feel like they're mine. You know, but you build that relationship already with them. So, and that's where I'm like, I think that's the, I think that's the best part about being a teacher, is seeing them grow, not just physically, but even like mentally. You know, like when you see that click, especially like in the special ed setting, I think it's like even more rewarding to see that click and that growth, because you see them where they started off, and you see them where they are now. You see how happy they get to know, because I'm one that shows them their progress. I'm the type of teacher that's like, okay, this is where you were at when you first started off with me. This is where you're at now. Look at yourself. Look at what you're doing. This is great. You know, this is amazing. And they'll get happy. You'll see their smile. Or they'll be like, Miss Perez, you know, what is my goal? Because they have goals, right? You know, what's my goal? Right before we start what we call progress monitoring, which is like we do it every, you know, to determine how much progress they've made. You know, what's my goal? What am I supposed to be doing? And, you know, we'll tell them. And, you know, sometimes they might not get to that. And I'm like, you know what? It's okay. You'll have more time, more opportunities. But look, you still made progress. And if they didn't, I'm like, it's okay. You know, we'll try again next time. Hear some of the parents also sometimes say, you know, I really have seen the progress. You know, it's amazing. You know, I think it's, like I said, teaching is a rewarding career in terms of you get to see it in the kids. I think that. I mean, if you ask me where I'm going career wise, I think right there. I think where I'm at. In terms of a mom, well, you know, like I told you, I want my kids to know that they have me as a support. But also I want them to know that if they're going to, you know, whatever they choose, whatever they decide, whatever they want to do with their life, whatever they dream, go for it. Do it. And if you have questions, or if you stumble upon the way, or something happens, get up. Get up. Remember what you're going for. Remember what it is you're looking at, and don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. Because, like I said, people are always going to have an opinion, and I think it's important for us to understand that we know what we want, and that's what I want my kids to understand. You know what you want, and if that's your dream and that's your goal, go for it. You know, I want them to understand that that's what I want for their future. I want them to be driven, you know, motivated, driven to do what they aspire to do. So that's my goal as a mom, to make sure my kids understand that.
I feel like I want to be a kid.
Come on, join us. You know, there's always room for more.
I appreciate the vulnerability. I think that's one thing that I want to start with. I appreciate you taking the time to you like opening yourself up and showing that vulnerability. I think there's a lot more relatability than what you and I can both imagine. And like someone else hearing this story and like maybe being in that right moment where it's like they're calling FAFSA, they're calling financial aid, or they're about to start their business, but something falls through, or they're not feeling secure, or they're feeling some imposter syndrome, but they hear this, and it's like, you're going to look right into the future, and the future version of yourself is going to say, I did it. Like, and someone else, your prima right next to you, is going to be like, congratulations. So I your story is amazing, Anna, and it made me a better person today, and I'm sure it'll make, you know, our team better people as well, because I say this a lot, like there's always going to be 3 listeners of this podcast, and it's going to be the 3 women behind this, behind Ali. So I just thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is a little different from the AG show. A&G show.
A little. We were talking about unicorns back then. And ponies, I think. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah, it was weird. We've come a long way.
Definitely.
But I appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your knowledge, for your words of encouragement, right? For the way that you speak about motivation and how you speak about your kids is beautiful. So thank you so much. Thank you for the tears. It was great. I needed it. It's okay to cry, by the way.
Excuse my ugly cry. I think at one point it really was, and I was like, I was like, excuse me while I take a moment.
This is a safe space. But I appreciate you. This is Ali, Atrévete a lo Imposible, Season 1, Episode 3. Thank you so much, Anna.